Well, hello. My name is Angelle Wood, and this is Crime of the Truest Kind. Well, hello, everyone. It's April in New England, creating the illusion that spring is on its way. There are little plants busting their way out of the ground. It's hopeful. Welcome, everybody. Good to see you. How have you been? Special thanks in order, Sandy, Brooke, David, Crime of the Truest Kind supporters via Buy Me a Coffee, and new true crimer Mark. Thank you very much. You may support the show Buy Me a Coffee at crimeofthetruestkind.com. It's also there where you can read all about the show. Show notes. You can listen to the show there, find links. The Crime of the Truest Kind gallery, which is the Instagram feed. Thanks very much for your reviews. A new favorite. New England has always had its own strange culture, and with that comes its own brand of crime. Angelle covers fascinating cases with concise and capturing detail. I love the local facts that she uses to draw you in and set the scene. It's refreshing to listen to a true crime podcast that manages to juggle authenticity, candidness, and a passion for storytelling all at once. Thank you so much, Spooky Dumont. 5 stars approved. You may do just what Spooky Dumont did at Apple Podcasts. So all 14 episodes are available everywhere you listen. Please follow, subscribe there. Also rate and give the show a review. And I love to read yours. I'll read yours on next show. One last thing before we get started. Awesome merch at Crime of the Truest Kind. Click the shop link. You've heard me tell you a number of times that I am a New Englander, and I tell these stories with a great deal of pride and reverence. So the stories I have covered to date are all things that I remember or had some sort of impact when I first heard about them. And this one is no different. Yet I was reminded by a very good friend who grew up in this town and was directly involved with the people that are in this story. Today we travel to Canton, Massachusetts, 1986, in the story of Shaun Ouillette. Canton, Massachusetts is a small town, population just over 21,000 people in the 2010 census. I would say it's going to ring in close to that when the 2020 census rolls out, whenever that is. Canton is part of the greater Boston metro area. It's about 15 miles from the city of Boston. And Canton lies at the foot of the Great Blue Hill. With a little bit more diversity, Canton's makeup is 81% white, not the 90+ of a lot of the other towns that I've covered in the state. And home of the Canton Bulldogs. Right on. Is there a better name for a team? I mean, come on, I think not. Canton Pugs might be weird, but equally as adorable. Let's talk about people from Canton. A lot of sports people I'm really not that interested in talking about. DJ Uncle Dan, who reminded me about this story initially, is from Canton. Paul Guilfoyle, actor known for his work on CSI Crime Scene Investigation. I know you would like that. Hillary Lawrence Hemingway, co-founder of Massachusetts Audubon Society. I bring her up for a couple of reasons. The Massachusetts Audubon Society is very important. And it's a woman. When I look at a town's Wikipedia page, it's mostly dudes and mostly sports dudes. Boston Rob is from Canton, Rob Mariano. He's pretty much what I call a career reality show personality. Steven Schnetzer is an actor who I had to look up. And then I learned he's a soap opera actor and has been in a number of them that I used to love, like One Life to Live, and ones I've never watched, like Guiding Line, As the World Turns, those CBS ones. I was all ABC soaps back in the day. I stopped watching them right around high school, I do recall. I did watch Days of Our Lives with my grandmother. That's the same Nana who read the detective magazines, the graphic as fuck ones. And who's the most notable person from Canton, Massachusetts? Actor and comedian Bill Burr. He went to Emerson for radio, so I feel a bit of a kinship there. And he's done stand-up for years. You've seen him in movies like Daddy's Home 1 and 2. Yep, we needed 2 of those. And The King of Staten Island. You've seen him on Breaking Bad, and more recently on The Mandalorian. Oh, and my favorite of his work, F is for Family on Netflix. He's a bit of an acquired comedic taste and is known for his rage comedy, quote-unquote rage comedy. He pisses off a lot of people, and I know why. Canton is known for the Eleanor Cabot Bradley Estate, a non-profit country house and garden ground museum. It's very lovely. The grounds are open every day, sunrise to sunset, with no charge. They host many private functions there, weddings, hoedowns. No, I don't think they do hoedowns, but you should book a hoedown there. And the piece de resistance for me, Canton is the headquarters of Dunkin' Donuts, a local phenomena with a cult-like following. It's so very Boston. It is both loved and despised here by locals. SNL did a terrific skit a few years ago with Casey Affleck about the phenomenon of Dunkin' Donuts.
You want to talk real customers? Kid, that's me. I'm like the mayor of Dunkin's. This is the face of Dunkin' Donuts right there.
Hey, you can't smoke in here, man.
I'm not, Mark. I'm not smoking
You're smoking in here.
It's outside. I'm just
It's covered in
Yeah, I come down to Dunkin' every day.
14-year-old high school freshman Shaun Ouillette was a jovial kid. He loved things kids his age liked. His mom's fresh baked cookies, Thanksgiving dinner, shooting off fireworks, sports, fishing. He was a good-natured and adventurous kid. Back then, we'd probably call him pudgy, but he was also tall, 5'11", as his mom says in an ID documentary. His immediate family was his mom, Jeannie, and his 13-year-old sister, Yvonne, who had relocated to Canton about a year before. They'd moved from Hull, a coastal town with a peninsula off the southern edge of the Boston Harbor. Hull is also very small, a population about 10,000 people on a very small piece of land. Hull is also home to Nantasket Beach. Fantastic Nantasket. Shaun was having some trouble as the new kid. He was new in town, and it was his first year at Canton High. And a lot of the other kids had grown up together in town. So he, of course, was the outlier. He missed his friends in Hull and was hoping to make some pals with the locals. We know kids can be cruel and mean, especially to the new kid. And for any of us who was the new kid in the new town, in the new school, we know it's particularly stressful. Shaun was definitely being picked on. When I was a little kid in school, there was no protection from bullying. That didn't exist. Unless another kid spoke up, it was fair game. And thank the sweet Lord we didn't have Facebook or Snapchat or YouTube or any of it. Anybody over the age of 35 will tell you that, and I am clearly that. Shaun wanted friends. He was a sweet and trusting kid, generally happy and helpful. His younger sister Yvonne, who was 13, had cerebral palsy and used a wheelchair. Shaun would often be behind her, wheeling her to school at the Massachusetts School for Handicapped Children. That is the main reason why they moved to Canton, so Yvonne could go to that school. Thursday, November 20th, 1986 started off as any regular day. A late November snowstorm had moved into New England, dropping several inches of snow, canceling school the day before. So that Thursday, Shaun had gotten up and gone to school like most other days. His mom, Jeannie, who was an EMT with a local ambulance company, reacted like all hurried moms getting teenagers out of the house in the morning. Do what you need to do and get to the bus on time. She saw him at the door. They looked at each other. No words were exchanged. Little did she know at the time that that would be the last time. And like a lot of moms, Jeannie took a little quiet time that afternoon to catch a cat nap on the couch before the house filled with the sounds of teenagers raiding the fridge, a common Shaun occurrence, until she was jolted awake from a nightmare. It was 3:30 in the afternoon, long past the time Shaun should be home from school. She knew in that moment that something was wrong. Her first plan of action was to call the friend she knew in town. No one had seen him. Once it started to get dark and there was still no sign of Shaun, Jeannie called his friends Robbie and Jonathan again. They still hadn't seen him since school. That's not entirely true. I'll come back to that. After the calls brought no answers, Jeannie drove to the Canton Police Department. Shaun was missing, and no one had seen him since school. It was now dark out, past supper time, and Shaun didn't miss a meal. She was adamant he was missing, not a runaway. She knew he did not go back to Hull. It was too far and too cold. Despite one kid saying he saw Shaun back in his hometown, that proved to be a bogus lead from a kid who just wanted to insert himself into the story. Police began to question the kids from school, asking what Shaun did that day. Several of them told detectives that he had plans to see a new friend after school. That friend, they learned, was another 14-year-old freshman named Rod Matthews. He was a small kid, Red hair, glasses, less than 100 pounds, about 5 feet 3 inches tall. Detectives paid visits to the friends that Shaun knew from school. The same friends Jeannie Quinn had called for any information on Shaun. Jonathan Cash and Robbie Peterson, both of whom said they hadn't seen Shaun since school that day. Detectives went to the Matthews home to question him about the last time that he saw Shaun. Both Rod and his mother were at home at the time of the visit, where Rod claimed he hadn't seen him, that they had made plans, and that Shaun didn't show up. Mrs. Matthews had nothing to add to the police questioning at that first visit. With no leads, detectives went to Hull to question people there. One person claimed to have seen Shaun playing. Once Jeannie heard that, she had to follow up. That search came up empty. At the same time, a bus driver came forward to say that they distinctly remember dropping Shaun off at Pleasant Street with a red-headed kid. Rod Matthews lived in the area of Pleasant Street and had red hair. He had a pretty distinctive appearance. It was unlikely that he was going to go undetected. At this point, students from Canton High have been questioned a few times. But a detective, Detective Devine, returns to the Matthews home. He tells Matthews that a bus driver knows that she dropped Shaun off at his stop and they got off the bus together. It's then when his mother, Janice Matthews, chimed in with, "Oh, you mean that heavyset kid? Is that Shaun?" She knew he'd been at their house, and she knew her son was lying about it. And then she miraculously remembered that Shaun was there that day playing with Rod. And now she knew he was missing. He then nonchalantly reveals that Shaun was there to buy some bottle rockets. Rod Matthews was known to deal illegal fireworks out of his house to the kids in town. That's how I was reminded of this story. A friend who grew up in Canton knew all of these kids and bought fireworks from Rod Matthews. He told me what he remembers about the case. In one of our text exchanges, he said he remembers the school putting all the kids on buses to go to Shaun's funeral. I asked him if he remembered what Rod Matthews was like. He said he seems like a pretty normal kid who was a good break dancer and that he did sell fireworks. So welcome to my text exchange. The detective prodded for more and asked him why he hadn't told him the first time he was there to question him about where Shaun was. And he asked Matthews what if he's hurt. Matthews said in his characteristically cold demeanor, he's fine. And then he told him not to tell anyone. He hated it in Canton and everyone was picking on him. He said he was going back to Hull. When the detective asked if he was sure he was going to Hull and if he was sure that's all he knew, Matthews looked up at the detective with an evil grin on his face. What really happened that day is Rod Matthews planned to murder Shaun Ouillette. He used the ruse to build a fort, and they would shoot off some fireworks in the wooded area in the town they called the Pits. He carried the baseball bat, saying he had to bring it to someone after. As he and Shaun walked into the woods, Matthews had him walk ahead, saying his feet were cold, and he figured that Shaun's high-top sneakers would create a better trail in the snow for Matthews to walk in his low-top shoes. Plausible excuse, I guess, for 14-year-old kids. The truth is that Matthews wanted to disguise his own steps. So he walked by stepping in the footprints of Shaun left in the snow. That is diabolical. As Shaun stepped ahead, he said to himself in those moments before, "If I'm going to do it, I better do it now." Then he hit Shaun with the bat in the back of the head. That big kid, 5'11", at least 165 pounds. He fell to his knees and cried out. And Matthews continued to hit him with the bat until he was dead. The other part of his plan is that he had stuffed a large knife in his sock because part of his murderous fantasy was to dismember his victim, remove his limbs, and toss them in the woods. He decided against that in the moment due to the effort that it would take and the mess it would make. Instead, he wiped the blood from the bat in the snow. And just like that, a 14-year-old boy pulled off his premeditated murder fantasy on the new kid at school. His planning and execution was more sinister than a professional. So after that, he walked out of the woods carrying the bat from that horrific scene and down the street in broad daylight to Robbie's house, where he was playing outside. Matthews rolled up and matter-of-factly announced that he had just killed Shaun Ouillette. Robbie couldn't believe him. For all Matthews' bluster, did he actually do it? Leaving the knife and bat behind, Matthews took Robbie to the scene to prove to him that he followed through with the murder he had been talking about for weeks. When Robbie asked him why he did it, he just shrugged and said, "Just for the heck of it." After viewing Shaun's dead body in the snow, they walked back to Robbie's house. Matthews retrieved his knife and his Louisville slugger and went home for supper. Robbie was out of sorts. He did not have supper. He went home and went to bed. From that point on, Robbie barely ate, and he slept with the lights on. Later that night, Robbie called Jonathan Cash and told him Matthews had murdered Shaun. Jonathan refused to believe him. And for several days after, Matthews would taunt Jonathan, asking, "Do you believe me?" When he said he didn't, Matthews would say, "Well, where's Shaun then?" Eventually, Matthews took both Robbie and Jonathan to the woods to look. It wasn't unlike the movie River's Edge, where one member of the group kills his girlfriend and invites his friends to come and see the body like she's on display. River's Edge was released in September 1986 at a number of film festivals, so it got mentioned in a lot of news coverage. Uncoincidentally, it became the #1 rental in Canton that following year. As the boys left the murder scene and took their bikes to the mall, Matthews threatened them not to talk, or they could be next. He now proved capable of anything. They hung out, window shopped, grabbed some food. After pizza at the mall, Jonathan's mother drove everybody home. As soon as he got home, Jonathan locked himself in his bedroom. He was shaking. He was beginning to realize the magnitude of what he had just seen, and he was terrified. Meanwhile, Shaun's mom, Jeannie, was existing solely on coffee and cigarettes. She did bake a continuous supply of fresh-baked cookies, hoping that the smell would waft out the window and bring Shaun home. People do all kinds of things when they're heartbroken and desperate to see their loved ones again. It was how she coped. And some of the townspeople weren't particularly comforting. She was an outlier. And on more than one occasion, they told her that she brought bad luck to Canton. Never underestimate people's ability for cruelty. The police investigation into Shaun's disappearance increasingly pointed to Matthews. During 3 separate police interviews, he denied having any knowledge of Shaun's whereabouts on or after November 20th. In a 4th interview, he admitted that he had come to his house, that they'd played pool. Shaun wanted to buy bottle rockets, but said he left with a plan to run away and go back to Hull. During these interviews, Matthews, the scrawny 14-year-old, he appeared at ease and unconcerned, and usually grinning. He operated with the demeanor of a seasoned sociopath. Meanwhile, no one connected the fires that were being lit around town, the dead cats that were showing up in the neighborhood. Jonathan and Robbie wanted the police to somehow discover where Shaun was and arrest Rod without their involvement. But as more time passed and winter set in for the long haul, that seemed more unlikely. Canton police learned that Shaun had planned to see Matthews on the day he disappeared. Their meeting was actually delayed a day due to the snowstorm the day before that canceled school. And Matthews proceeded to stonewall them with the skill of a hardened criminal, not a shy 14-year-old suburban kid that weighed 96 pounds. His use of Ritalin plays into that, and I'll come back to it. On December 9th, almost 3 weeks since Shaun went missing, an anonymous female caller had contacted Canton PD with the information that a kid at work had given her, saying Shaun Ouillette was hurt, someone had attacked him with a baseball bat, and he was in the woods. That person was a woman named Lori, one of the 3 co-workers at his part-time job at Marshall's department store who Jonathan Cash had confided in about the murder. She said he first hinted at what he knew about Shaun's disappearance on December 8th at 5:30, when she was getting off work and his shift was about to start. He gave the information in what she called bits and pieces, and it was clear to her that he was looking for someone to help him. He did not want to be the one who went to the police. out of some teenage loyalty, I guess, and legitimate worry that Rod Matthews would come for him. Jonathan Cash and Robbie Peterson were terrified, yet unwilling to tell their parents, teachers, or any adult what they knew and what they saw. They protected themselves. They were, after all, 15 years old. So for 3 weeks, while Shaun's family were going out of their minds with worry and grief, the boys avoided being alone with Matthews, even so much as making a pact that if one ended up dead, the other would go to the police. Jonathan was an easygoing kid who now slept with a knife under his pillow, while Robbie refused to go to school unless his sister brought him in her car. One morning she left without him, so he stayed home. When Jonathan noticed his absence, he was so panicked that he called Robbie's mother from school and asked her to check his room and see if he was okay. None of this raised any red flags with parents. None of it. To Jonathan's mother, Barbara, the dark circles growing under his eyes added up to some kind of teen angst, a poor eating and sleeping schedule. Linda Peterson, Robbie's mother, noticing something was off with her kid, sent him to a doctor, who asked him why he wasn't eating. But all he said was that he had a sore throat. Nothing seemed to come from Jonathan's revelations to his co-workers at Marshall's. Simply put, the anonymous caller gave such vague information, and then they hung up. They didn't really have a lot to go on. Using the local news media, the police department requested that caller call back. Shortly after midnight on December 10th, as his mother slept upstairs, Jonathan Cash got dressed in his first-floor bedroom and headed out alone to the pits. Guided only by the full moon's light, because we had no iPhones, imagine that. He rode his bicycle 1.5 miles in the chilly winter air to the top of the hill where Shaun's body was still in the frozen ground. For 10 long minutes, he studied the surroundings and memorized identifying landmarks. Then he pedaled all the way back home and wrote a 2-page anonymous letter to Canton police, describing where they could find Shaun and identified Rod Matthews as the murderer. The letter read in part, Shaun Ouillette did not run away. He wasn't in trouble with anyone, and he didn't take a bus anywhere. He went to Rod's house to buy bottle rockets, unaware of Rod's plan to kill him. There are only 2 other people besides Rod that know of his action, and I shouldn't even have told you this, because he said he'd kill us if we told. I was not there when Rod killed Shaun, but he told me of it that night. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you sooner or in person, but I'm afraid that you will make me an accessory to the fact, and I wish to remain anonymous. Between Sawyer Ave and the new industrial park off Sherman Street, you will find Shaun in the woods at the top of a hill. At the bottom of this hill is old concrete pipes, and also from the top of the hill you can see a red house. The Canton Police Department received that anonymous letter at 2 p.m. on December 11th, and they found Shaun that afternoon. After 3 weeks of being exposed to the elements, one hand was missing due to the wildlife in the area. Responding to a TV news report, Lori, the co-worker who made the first anonymous call, contacted the police and identified Jonathan as the letter's author. Jonathan and Robbie were questioned at length by police, telling detectives about the bat Matthews brought over that day. Police went to the Matthews house to look for a bat, of which Matthews said he didn't own any. But his sister chimed in and said she did have bats at home. Laboratory tests run on the bat found in the Matthews home revealed remnants of blood and hair. December 13th, 1986 was Rod Matthews' last day as a free man. But he wasn't even a man yet. He showed no emotion as he was arrested for murder. The discovery of Shaun's body and the arrest of a 14-year-old boy for his death shocked not only the families involved, but the many residents of Canton, especially children. One boy, who like Shaun, was a new arrival to town and had been subjected to hazing by Cantonites. He was so terrified that he kept a baseball bat nearby for protection from potential murderers. Jeannie Quinn, her daughter, and Shaun's sister Yvonne were inconsolable. His father was angry. His younger half-brother Matthew was 7 when he learned Shaun had been killed. His only understanding of it at the time was to ask if he had been eaten by a bear. It was unfathomable for anyone, especially a 7-year-old boy. The story got enormous media attention, due in large part to the age of the perpetrator and the brutality of his crimes. A community in shock and disbelief was poised for a very lengthy legal fight. After his arrest, Matthews underwent a series of interviews with psychiatrists. His case puzzled them. His family had no history of mental illness. His brain scan was normal. He did not suffer from a specific disorder such as schizophrenia. If we go back into the events of his life leading up to the murder of Shaun Ouillette, we do see a disturbing pattern developing. Around Halloween 1986, Matthews told his classmates, Robbie Peterson and Jonathan Cash, that he wanted to know what it was like to kill someone. Then, in early November, after initially considering 2 boys to kill, Rod Matthews told the boys that he had decided Shaun Ouillette would be the one that he would kill. His reasoning was that he would be, quote, easy to get, and he probably would be the least missed because he didn't have many friends. His plan was to carry out the murder on November 19th, but a snowstorm canceled school that day. He stuck with his plan, and on November 20th, Shaun came over. After playing pool together, Matthew suggested that they go in the woods and build a fort. And he brought a baseball bat. Going back even further, shortly before Halloween, a 9th grade health teacher at Canton High School received an unusual note in his problem box. Frank Tricomi, who was also the football coach, used the messages in the box to solicit anonymous submissions of student problems, real or imagined, as topics for class discussion. The topics usually dealt with the big D's of suburban life: dating, drinking, divorce. This one was very different and made the teacher uneasy. The note read, "My problem is that I like to do crazy things. I've been lighting fires all over the place. 2 weeks ago, I lit a bonfire of hay down in the pits. It was in flames about 8 feet high. The other kids thought I was crazy. Lately, I've been wanting to kill people I hate, and I've been wanting to light houses on fire. What should I do?" The teacher knew who left the note. A small red-haired student named Rod Matthews dropped it into the box. As was his custom, Mr. Tricomi copied it over and tore up the original. He then made a call to the Canton Journal to check whether there had been any fires at the pits, the wooded area the local kids used to hang out in. The Journal had no reports of fires there, which reassured the teacher. He chalked it up to an attention-seeking teen trying to get a rise out of his teachers. The next day, Tricomi was surprised to see Matthew standing in the doorway of his classroom between periods. He asked the coach if he got his note. He told him he did. He also told him that arson is a felony, and murder is too. Matthews just laughed and walked away. He never mentioned his problem to Mr. Tricomi again. And the teacher did not address it in class. He didn't discuss it with other staff, with school administration, or with Matthew's parents. He just forgot all about it. That was until Shaun Ouillette went missing and was found beaten to death in the pits. Only then did Tricomi remember that note. Two events at the start of his freshman year may have contributed to his deterioration. There were a lot of things leading up to it. His parents separated again in September, and for the first time, they acknowledged their breakup to their son. But he had no reaction. Nothing seemed to bother him. His parents separated often, but Mr. Matthews would be in the home for lunch or dinner with the family and leave to go to his apartment in Dorchester near the family business. In mid-October, his sister rented a popular yet highly controversial documentary film of the time called Faces of Death. It portrayed brutal deaths by torture, electrocution, beheading, fire, suicide, even a bear attack. One psychiatrist who examined Matthews said it had inspired him to see what it was like to kill someone. It is possible. Something to know about Faces of Death. While it is now a horror cult classic with several sequels, It was shocking and outrageous, and it was banned in 46 countries for its graphic brutality. A shockumentary, if you will. Some high schools showed it in class, which, looking back at that, I don't know how they got away with it. But it was mostly fake. 30% real, 70% bullshit. Like the dogfight, fake. Eating live monkey brains, also fake. I had not thought about these movies for years until I started researching this story. I saw them, most of them, and they're definitely gory. And I think they probably did contribute to my interest in true crime, but they never influenced me to kill anyone. Rod Matthews had no humanity. He was 14. Kids aren't developed. They do stupid things. Good God, thankfully all of my youthful mistakes haven't defined me. But there's something different about this one. He daydreamed about murder. He planned to kill someone to see how it felt, just to know. I mean, I'd like to know what it's like to take a cotton candy bath, but me trying it? Unlikely. Rod Matthews became the judge, the jury, and the executioner the day he decided that Shaun Ouillette should die that November day. Blamed our non-reactive teachers, absent parenting skills, latchkey kids, ineffectual school administrators, behavioral modifying drugs. I am hesitant to place all the blame on the parents. Even Jeannie Quinn was blasted in media coverage for moving her kids around a lot, destabilizing them. And that could have contributed to Shaun's desire for friendship and how trusting he was with Matthews. But Shaun didn't do anything wrong. Nor did Jeannie Quinn. She was doing what she needed to do to care for her daughter, and she wanted her son with her. As an adult, I see my own parents' mistakes differently. And while no one in my family is a child murderer, parents do the best they can at the time. And Matthews had a number of behavioral issues, but teachers at school said it was his age, and he'd be fine. I do have to ask, though, how did they get it so wrong? Well, that's heavy. That concludes part 1. I have a whole bunch for part 2. Thank you for listening. crimeofthetruestkind.com. Drop in at the merch store. Buy yourself a badass mug or something. Visit me at buymeacoffee.com. Contribute to the show. It's linked on the website. Much appreciated. And do the important things, the very important things to help the show grow. Go to Apple Podcasts, subscribe, rate the show, and write a review. I will shout you out on the next show. Even if you just want to say that you love this bed music by Andrew King. Follow the show online. Facebook, Crime of the Truest Kind. Instagram, Crime of the Truest Kind. On Twitter, at Truest Kind, because it's a shorty. It's the only one that fit. Oh, on TikTok, Truest Kind. And everywhere you listen to your murder shows. Thank you for listening. It's been very quiet in here. Not a lot of dogs. Imagine that. All right, I'll catch you next time with part 2 of the Shaun Ouillette story, Canton, Massachusetts. Thank you for listening. In the meantime, lock your motherfucking doors.